This episode of Voices and Visions includes discussion of real-world themes explored in C.M. Alongi's work, including trauma, abuse, identity, and systemic issues. These topics are approached with care, but viewer discretion is advised. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Voices and Visions, where we explore the minds behind the stories, how they're created, what drives them, and how they connect with audiences. I'm your host, JL Graves. Now, in previous episodes, we've spoken with voice actors, dungeon masters, and TTRPG storytellers. This time, we're opening the door to another corner of storytelling, welcoming our very first author guest to the series. So to begin, would you please introduce yourself and what you're known for?
Apparently, I'm known for being the first author on Voices and Visions.
Yes.
I am Alongi. The C stands for Chris or Christina. Choose whichever. I honestly do not care. I am probably, ironically, best known for my online stuff, content creation. I have a TikTok series called CaFae Latte, spelled F-A-E, a cafe run by fairies. It does have, I have started a book series with that though. The first book being Heart of Iron. That came out in the past November. I also have some science fiction and epic fantasy books out, including The Witch Who Trades with Death, which is a dark fantasy that is, as of today, the time of recording, now available in got straight
Nice.
edges and everything.
Nice.
Yeah. And also for knitting. For those of you who are seeing this on video, you can see I am trying to. This is my third attempt at knitting this pair of gloves. It's gloves are a pain in the ass. But we're getting there. We get closer every time.
Right, and I've seen like other TikTok videos of CaFae Latte. You've done crochet as well.
Yeah, no, crochet is my preference because one, as you can see, it's just one book compared to this cluster um, of nightmare needles and yarn. And also, ironically, even though it's like simpler, you can get a lot more complex patterns with crochet, in my opinion. Um, and on top of that, while machines are able to knit and weave, it is impossible for a machine to crochet. So
Mm.
when someone gives you a crocheted project, you know for a fact there's no way a machine made this.
All right.
And in this
Well,
age of generative AI, I'm very firmly against the machine.
oh. Well, thank you for taking the time to sit down with me.
Hmm.
Before we dive into the worlds you've created, I'd love to start at the core of it all. Your voice as a storyteller and what shaped it. For those who may know you from CaFae Latte but haven't yet explored your novels, or some who may not know what CaFae Latte is, how would you describe the through line connecting all of your work?
Um, that's a damn good question because my work is all over the place. In terms of genre, in terms of the types of characters, but like there are some pillars of the Alongi brand, I guess you could say. I very much like diverse characters, not just smart ass women like myself. That is, there's probably going to be at least one smart ass, and they may or may not be a woman in each book that I
Right.
do. I just love those types of characters. Sarcasm is my love language. Yeah, so there's going to be at least one smart ass as the comic relief. Um, I I got a bachelor's degree in both history and social justice. So what I really like to do with my writing is um I will base the world off of very real issues that we're talking about today. Like, Heart of Iron takes place in Minnesota. It's urban fantasy, so there's a dragon barista and vampire ex-boyfriends and all that jazz. But like in the TikTok series, I was actually really annoyed because I live in Minneapolis. So in January, as I'm like writing out the outlining the script for the month, it was supposed to be the next step, the next saga in a specific character's redemption arc,
Mm-hmm.
going into that type of thing. And instead, I had to talk about ice and
Mm.
how all of these characters would respond to the horror that was happening in my city happening in their city
Uh huh.
because the CaFae Latte, the location, is in this made-up town of Vernier that's basically Hastings, Minnesota, where I grew up. That's half an hour from the Twin Cities. So they would absolutely be involved. And I took the opportunity to be like, here are all the different ways you can help and be involved. It's not just protesting and marching in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
There's archivists, there are people delivering groceries and driving kids to and from school. So we don't get picked up by strange men in
Yeah.
vests. There are the protesters. There are also like fundraisers. There are just so many different ways to do that. So talking about real life issues in fantasy and sci-fi settings, that's always gonna happen. Let's see here, what else? As I said, diverse characters. I am neurotypical, but Olivia, the main character of Citadel, is autistic. That really fell into the theme of communication in that story. And it was interesting going back to it too, because I hadn't Citadel came out in 2023, but I finished writing it and got the contract in 2021. So it
Mm.
had been like years since I'd been to the world of Citadel and visited Olivia and been in Olivia's mind. But I wasn't that rusty because Nicole from CaFae Latte is also autistic and she is Black and Sapphic and a Buddhist and a witch. So a lot of different things with that. So yeah, diversity, uh, social justice themes, powerful women, um, probably a few fight scenes, and smart assery. Those are the five pillars of an Alongi story.
Nice. First off, shout out to diversity. I'm also autistic.
Hey, yeah, no,
Hey!
I'm always actually genuinely thrilled. I put in the author's note at the start of Citadel, and I can always tell who skipped that note because in that note I specifically say I am not autistic. If I screwed up, here's my contact information. Let me know, and I will do better for the sequel or for future works or whatever. Um, and every now and then I get a fan who has read the book and is genuinely shocked that, my knowledge at least, I am not autistic. And I'm always super happy when I hear that because I'm just like, research, I did my job right.
Like, you know what's funny? I've actually not read Citadel, but I really, really want to, though.
Yeah, no, I just gave the sequel, Demon's Nest, to my editor. We're on
Ooh.
proofreading now. We're almost done. It's probably going to be out by the end of this year. Probably. Don't quote me on
Yeah,
that.
no worries. You actually did answer one of my questions, which was how have your disciplines in uh, history and social justice, your double bachelor's degrees, have shaped the kinds of stories you feel drawn to?
It's
As
really
really,
interesting because when I went to Hamlin University, I went there fully intending to get a bachelor's degree in creative writing. I'd been writing since I was 12. I wanted to be like a published author since I was like 16 as a career. So I went to Hamlin thinking I'm definitely going to do this as my bachelor's, but the problem was, God, their creative writing program, the laundry list of classes you needed to take. You basically needed to get into the introductory courses your
mm,
freshman year, first semester, or you were going to be there for a whole other year,
mm,
basically, in order to hit all those necessary courses, which was insane. Um, However, I could hit a bachelor's in history, which I didn't think I'd ever do because I hated history in high school. Like the way it was taught and the topics that we covered, it was just the same old BS.
mm-hmm.
So I hated it. And it wasn't until I got to college and I had a professor who was teaching like different points of view and really digging into here's why we study history. It's to ask ourselves why and how. How
Yes.
did these things happen? Why did they happen the way that they did? Why didn't the civil rights movement happen 30 years before? Like, stuff like that. And as I was falling in love with history, I realized this is really helpful for world building because I can take these questions of how and why and put them into an alien society, a fantasy society with magic and make them feel more realistic. So that was a big reason why I went that. And then when I found out that social justice was a major I could also do, I this was my third year, and I'm like, well, maybe I can do it as a minor. And I looked it up, and I realized I'd already taken like half the portion for it. because I was interested in those things. So I'm like, okay, we're double majoring. And the way Hamline University did it is if you majored in social justice, you needed to concentrate on something. And most of the concentrations were things like, race relations, gender
Hmm.
studies,
Yeah.
sexuality, environmental, just stuff like that. But I asked my advisor, can I concentrate in creative writing? Basically, learning how to use creative writing to talk about these issues and maybe even present possible solutions or ways of navigating these unjust systems and turning them more equal and just. And I was like the second person to do something like that. Apparently, the gal whose steps I was following did the same thing, but with visual art.
Oh,
That
okay.
was pretty cool. And so I just had to take 5 creative writing courses to do that. And those were the 5 easiest courses I ever took. Loved them. They were really great. And of course, the social justice courses and history courses really, really stretched and pushed me. And now I find myself, whenever I'm creating a brand new world, I often go back to the basics. And when it comes to things like Heart of Iron's sequel that I haven't even started working on because I'm still in the research phases of it,
Yeah.
Heart of Silver. And I'm just like, all
Ooh.
right, I need like all the history books on modern Native American history and the soldier's life, boots on the ground, World War II history, and a little bit of Black American history just as a refresher course. Like, I know where to look and what types of viewpoints I need for that type of thing. And it's really fun and it's really cool.
Oh yeah. Like a lot of the times the research stage is so much fun, but especially
I
given, yeah.
Yeah, especially if you're a nerd, but it's such a rabbit hole. And it's one of those things like probably going too deep into this, but do I care?
No.
Right off. So
Yeah.
splurge on Barnes and Noble and like save 10, 20 bucks on it. So,
Yeah, I remember like with creative writing, I took there were 2 classes that I took that were part of the gender, women, and sexuality studies um, courses when I went
mhm.
to college. I was a music major, just for context. But for 2 of those classes, there were some creative writing elements. One short story I wrote, it was realistic fiction fantasy about a runaway princess who is gender fluid and pansexual and demisexual, and her partner is intersex. And the other story was this was for queer pop culture, was try to like get a better understanding, like breaking the tropes of demisexuality, basically.
Mhm.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've been to a con recently and I was surprised at how many authors I ran into who are also songwriters. I was like, huh, those aren't two things like, novel writing and songwriting aren't really two things I would expect to go together, but there were a lot of them who did both. And I was like,
oh, you'd be surprised.
yeah, I mean, I guess it's like for me, it's like me and content writing, the skits that I do. It's the same, it's both storytelling, but it flexes different muscles. So it's a unique challenge, novel versus skits.
Yeah. Now, do you see yourself as primarily a novelist, a folklorist, a social commentator, or like something else entirely?
So like the way I introduce myself is content creator first and then author because I spend the vast majority of my time creating content. That is frankly what pays the bills.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I have uh, 3 novels and 5 novellas, and a cookbook, published, those I can't do those full time because what's an effort on a sucks when it comes to paying authors.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to devote the vast majority of my time to creating content, specifically TikTok videos and YouTube videos. Uh, so that's where I go. I don't consider myself a folklorist, even though I do research into folklore just for my characters. Um, for me, it's more, I guess, at best, I would say I have an interest in folklore and some knowledge of it, and an amateur historian best. Um, but at the end of the day, content creation, author, so storyteller. That's where I firmly place myself. Anytime someone is calling storytellers or creators, like that's where I'm at. That is where I most identify. That is the box for me as the cat. It fits, so I sit.
Nice. All right, so let's move on to our first section. One of the earliest places where some of that perspective as a social commentator kind of or like historian, what, call it what you will, shows up in your Blackwing series.
Mm.
Tell, for those who don't know about Blackwing, could you tell our audience what Blackwing is about?
So Blackwing is a novella series where so each install just to get into the nitty gritty here, a novel is considered anything over 50,000 words. So that's usually more than 200 pages. Whereas a novella is anything in the 20,000 to 50,000 word range. So smaller installments, but Blackwing Volume 1 has all five current installments. And it was inspired by the Diablo 2 video game that I played with my brother. And it's basically a necromancer and a paladin are forced to work together to save the world. And that's a big deal because paladins in this world are blessed by the gods. So they get their powers directly from the gods and cut them off at any time. And necromancers are condemned by the gods. They, in fact, had a whole genocide that, that was endorsed and started by the deities that was 200 years ago, and it was so devastating. They're still recovering from it, and they're still being oppressed and persecuted for it. And Janua, our main character and paladin, starts the story like, well, of course the gods did that because necromancers are evil and they're corrupt and like they're born with this power. They don't earn it, so it's really easy for them to fall into evil. Like they don't have a check and balance system like we do. And then she meets Antiku, this older necromancer, very cynical and educated, and he is just like, "Oh, you are wrong about everything, but we're both stuck together to. We both want to deal with this bigger problem, so I guess we're working together, and hopefully you won't kill me, and then I won't have to kill you out of self-defense." And through their adventures together, Janua realizes, "Oh, my gods were wrong, like about everything." and and so she has that, that moment that I think a lot of people have. A lot of her, frankly, a lot of her inner processes and revelation and character arc was determined by, when you're a white person and you're living in America and you start learning about, you know, slavery and just how horrible it was, and then the Jim Crow laws, and then you
Mm-hmm.
realize, oh, those things are still affecting us today. They are still causing problems today. This is still a system that I, just by the power of my skin, am benefiting from, that is hurting other people. And just that horror, and even though it's not your fault, it still causes like this, ugh, like I don't want this to be a thing. I don't want to be responsible for this. I no, I don't want this to happen. And on Tiku, on the flip side, he has the classic, super cynical, kind of hopeless guy who is doing his job because it's a job that needs to be done, but he doesn't expect any actual positive long form change to happen. And Janua being the young idealist, like we are going to change the world for the better, is kind of basically reintroducing him to hope and the idea that we can change the world, and maybe we won't live to see those changes, but we can make a damn good effort and put down the building blocks for other people to go up.
Interesting. So the series follows Janua forced to question everything she believes. What kind of drew you to create? Well, I think you answered part of this question, but what drew you to a character whose journey centers on unraveling certainty?
I mean, obviously it was my personal journey. I'm lucky enough that I was born and raised in a family that, you know, was very blunt about, here are all the problems in the world, and we're not going to sugarcoat it. This is a real thing that happened. Critical thinking skills was very highly prized in the Alongi household, still is. And as I've grown and matured and absorbed the world around me, I've realized that those types of things are something of a rarity, especially in this country, where a lot of people, they refuse to My roommate just came in.
Yeah, you're right.
A lot of people just refuse um, to properly research, to even think about it. They will deny, they'll at best they'll be like, yeah, slavery and Jim Crow were a thing, but that was so long ago. Like they don't have an impact on us today. And it's like there are people who like were alive. Ruby Bridges, the little girl who was like, that we had who has that super famous painting of her going into a newly integrated school. She's still alive. And it's like just like it as and it was this was after Trump's first term, um, and in the second half of Biden's.
Mm.
So it very much felt like, we need to have a conversation about rewriting history. This was when, you know, critical race theory was being taught in schools, and DEI was first starting to be like demonized, and just whole bits of history were being overwritten or rewritten or just wiped out entirely by people who didn't want to admit that their ancestors were horrible, that they are resting on a system that hurts others to benefit them. And the first step in tearing down such a system and building something new is to admit that it's there. So volume one of Blackwing, the first five novellas, are basically Genoa going, oh, this thing exists and it's awful. Okay, how do I smash it?
So when writing a faith-driven character, how do you balance belief, doubt, and emotional realism?
So it helps that in this world the gods really are real. Like it's a fantasy world. There are gods and deities, and that is just a part of the world. In the third novella, um, the in the third novella, there's like a forest that is sentient, and it's moving, and so they've got to try to deal with that. Junoa regularly talks to an angel. She can't talk to her god because he's basically too higher up. He's the king of deities. There's like
Mm.
8 levels of bureaucracy between them. But she has, her commanding officer is basically an angel who disagrees with her on a lot of stuff, especially her stance on necromancers later
Mm.
in the series. And so that's a lot easier because it's just like, yeah, magic exists in this world, divinity exists in this world. There are in fact multiple types of there are three major pantheons. The gods that Janua was getting her powers from, the primordials, who are the ancestors of the gods, who are just like the living embodiment of, hatred, love, courage, fear. And who are, as this series progresses, Juno and Antique slowly really trying to make play for the celestial throne again, right? And then there are like the nature spirits, which are just the primal spirits of the woods, of animals, of rivers and oceans that have just always been there. And so you've got these three types of pantheons, and you have people who worship one or like two over the other. Janua is really unique because, like me, she comes from a multi-faith household. Um, Janua, and her people, yes, they worship the new modern pantheon with her the god king Jadim as the top dog, but they also worship a couple of the primordials, life and death, and they also revere this massive river spirit that comes through their territory. So they hit all three, and that gives Janua kind of a secret superpower, where she's put in these positions where she's expected to by the people around her to like condemn a certain people or deity for like because they're worshiping the primordials, or they're worshiping the nature spirits, or they're worshiping a different god than what she's used to, and she's just like, yeah, like it's it all the time. Like she has no qualms about worshiping other deities other than the one who is giving her power, and that allows her to gain allies and friends and help that would otherwise be closed off to her colleagues.
Interesting. So, what interests you most about belief systems when they are placed under pressure?
But oh, honestly, like religion and religious history has just always fascinated me because it's one of those kind of visible and also invisible threads that in society, like you just can't when you're just looking at American history, you can't study American history. You can't really understand, how big of a deal the founding fathers and the War of Independence was. You can't really understand just even our modern day and issues without looking at the different religious forces behind them because they play such a role in how we think and act because it is so foundational to our beliefs. If you believe the world is one way, you're going to act like the world is a certain way, whether or not it actually is. And from a psychological standpoint, from a historical standpoint, it's just fascinating to me, especially since, as I said, I grew up in a multi-faith household. One parent is Christian, raised Catholic, but switched to Presbyterianism because they liked the community better and they liked having me and my brother raised in that church specifically. And then the other parent is atheist.
Mm.
So I grew up watching, and I have an uncle who's Jewish. My grandparents were devoutly Catholic. Other grandparents were agnostic. I went to college and I made a bunch of Muslim friends. Like it was just always a thing in my life. And when I was a teenager, that age where you start seriously questioning and pushing back against everything. I straight up told my dad one day in the Barnes and Noble, I don't believe in God and I want to convert to a different religion. And he said, okay. And that day, like I hit the world religion section of the Barnes and Noble and bought a bunch of books. And when I was 16, I stumbled into Nichiren Buddhism. And I've been a Nichiren Buddhist ever since. I got, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, our mantra, is literally tattooed on my arm.
Nice.
This is my first tattoo, by the way.
Yeah,
My mom was
nice.
concerned. She's like, it's so big. Doesn't it hurt? I'm like, hurt. It's a cool. She bits. Um, but yeah, but I was like 16 years old is when this happened. Not the tattoo, the conversion. And I was fully supported by my parents and my brother. They drove me to Buddhist meetings and, helped me bake fudge for them and chatted with the friends that I was making in that community. And like, um, they really just cared that I had a community, a loving community that was supportive and non-toxic and would be there for me when shit hits the fan. That's all they cared about, whether it was Buddhist, Christian, atheistic, satanic, they did not care. Religion in our minds is basically dressing. It's decoration. What matters is the actual core beliefs within of how you treat your fellow human, uh, how you think about critical thinking skills, basically, and all that stuff. And so that was my normal. And to find out that there are so many people who don't have that, who were like done for leaving the church, who had to be cut off from family just
Wow.
because they were like, yeah, I don't believe in God, or I've been too hurt by people in the church or whatever. It's just like, that is such a dumb reason to cut someone off, in my opinion. And so that's always kind of given me fascinated me in almost a morbid way.
Yeah.
And you can really kind of see that in Citadel and Blackwing, where I'm like, here's all the bad ways that faith has twisted and abused its power and um, created these horrible divisions. But also there are characters, Janua among them in Blackwing. In Citadel, it's Riley, who find strength and beauty in religion and use it as a source of like, I'm going to be a compassionate person. I'm going to be a better person. I'm going to help people. I'm going to risk my life to try to improve my community and save my fellow human beings, or Samira in Riley's case. And they pull their strength from religion, from their holy texts, from their deities. In Janua's case, quite literally. In Riley's case, a little more figuratively.
Nice. And across the 5 novellas, how did your understanding of each character, specifically Junua, evolve?
I mean, I wrote them all kind of at the same time. You know, I was like boom, 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 and I wrote them all in very quick succession. And then, because the 5 novellas are kind of its own. It's almost like a season arc. Each novella is an episode, and the entire all 5 of them are like their own season 1 arc. And now I'm working on season 2. Um, and my understanding of Genoa is, she is at her core a good person. She wants to make the world a better place. She believes she can make it a better place. She's like 21, 22 years old. She's basically that type of college student who is like, to save the world and nothing's going to stop me. And then she runs face first into all the things that are going to try to stop her. And she's like, but I can bench lift a tank, so I'm going to do it anyway. Um, Basically, she starts that novella 1 very misguided
Mm.
because she was told, necromancers are pure evil and everything that my gods do is right and good and just in the world. And by the time novella 5 is started, she has, first of all, she's like, okay, necromancers are just like everyone else. We got good ones, we got bad ones. Um, they're just born with this ability, and we should be there to help them and support them rather than, you know, try to hunt them down like animals. And she also acknowledges my God made a mistake. My deities made a mistake, and other deities have made other mistakes. Like in novella 2, Hedgar of Tur, she goes toe to toe with the god of disease, and she very strongly disagrees with how he's handling the situation of a city state's king who disrespected him. And because this king disrespected him, he's cursing the entire city with plague. And Juno was like, you can't just punish hundreds of thousands of people for the actions of one idiot. And he's like, I'm a god, yes I can. And so like they have this whole back and forth with that through his angel, obviously. And so by the time novella 5 comes around, she has acknowledged that both necromancers and gods are basically people. You have good ones, you have bad ones, yet they make mistakes, they have problems, they have issues, they have prejudices, they have blind spots. And that is continuing. I'm working on the third novella for volume 2 right now. And that is a theme that continues as she and Antiku go out into the ocean and continue to chase after the Purpose, trying to destroy the world. Um, and so it's really just a matter of, she doesn't have to learn how to be a good person. She just has to educate herself and learn how to think a little more critically. That's her biggest flaw. But and on the other hand, Antiku, who is kind of her best friend slash mentor by novella 5, also has to learn that, like, just because life sucks sometimes, a lot of the time, that doesn't mean that every person is out to get you. It doesn't mean that it can never improve. It can improve, you just have to put in the work.
Nice. Also, if you notice, there was a tail in the middle of the screen. Fizzgig decided to come up and sit on my lap.
He's so fluffy.
Yeah, she's really fluffy and really soft. She will stay in my room. I'll probably put this clip in as a YouTube short. But there was hair in my mouth. Jeez. From long form storytelling to something that began almost on impulse, CaFae
Mm-hmm.
Latte took a very different path. So,
It really did.
for those who don't know what CaFae Latte is, how would you describe it?
CaFae Latte is a TikTok series that is about a cafe run by fairies. It
Mm-hmm.
is urban fantasy, paranormal, that was started as a Tumblr prompt, basically, a couple of them, and has since taken over my life.
Yeah, I think I'm like mostly caught up to with all of the episodes of CaFae Latte. And then I became obsessed with urban fantasy because of it.
Yay!
What do you remember about that initial moment when CaFae Latte first came to life?
So basically, what happened was this was February of 2023. This was a month after this was 2 years into me being on TikTok when I got my contract for Citadel in 2021, and my agent was like, "You should be on TikTok," and I'm like, "Oh, I don't wanna." Um, but I joined anyway, and because I was already on YouTube for a while, I was already pretty comfortable on camera. My learning curve was much shorter. And by February 2023, I already had a couple of mini viral series. The Asexual and the Succubus was really fun. Accidentally Kidnapped, which was in January of that year. And I had managed to turn a bunch of those fans of that just 6-part series on TikTok into patrons over on Patreon by writing the first draft of a book based on that premise, which I swear I will turn into a proper book series later when I don't have 3 open book series right now. Okay, I got to finish either Citadel, CaFae Latte, or Blackwing before I can start on Kingdom of Starlight, which is what that's going to be called. Um, but at the time, I kind of had an idea of like, okay, what type of video is going to be mini viral is what I called it. It's like a few thousand views, maybe even 100,000 views. After 2, 3, 4 videos, the analytics will drop, and I'll have to find something else. Um, and at the time, these Tumblr posts were running around. One was, what if they ran coffee shops? Like, you're not supposed to eat any or drink anything that the Fae give you, but
Hmm.
you tried their lattes? And if you're paying them, then it's fine. Like that's the deal. You're paying them amount of money and give you food. Fine. And at the same time, this other post was coming around, the Fae said trans rights, where, if you are trans or non-binary, they say never give your name to the Fae, but what does that mean? It doesn't mean your legal name? Does it mean your dead name? Does a dead name even have any power over you? What about nicknames? Stuff like that. It's basically a soft magic system where the more you think about it, the more it falls apart. So with those two things in mind, and at the time I was also working food service. Um, Briano's Deli Italia in Eagan, Minnesota. If you're ever in the area, check it out. It's really good. And they paid me enough that I was able to work there part time and still pay all my bills. So very good employment. Um, and anyway, so that just came to mind, and I was like, okay, I'll do a little skit called Fae Latte. It wasn't CaFae Latte until episode 3, and that was at the suggestion of a fan in my comments.
Oh.
Um, and I made that skit here in my living room in my apartment, when my roommates were gone, and was like, okay, here's like 1, 2, 3 quick skits in quick succession. It's probably going to hit a few thousand, and then again, like I said, after about a week, the analytics are gonna drop off. They did not drop off, as you can imagine. They just kept growing, and I realized like, oh, this is gonna be a thing. So okay, and it kind of caught me a little off guard because when it comes to writing, I'm a planner. I plan everything out. I write all of my scripts ahead of time. I outline everything. I like knowing in advance, plot twists and character motivations and names. And I didn't even know Bob didn't have a name at the time. Jennifer Charles was the first named character, and Cyrus and Nicole didn't even exist yet. Like nothing. And so I had to scramble to like create more characters and figure out the basic rules of this world, and even do a little bit of basic Fey lore knowledge and what's modern Fey lore versus 19th century Fey lore versus medieval, and just that was a whole rabbit hole and a half. But after a bit of scrambling, then I was like, okay, now I'm going to do a week's worth of content on this one day, and that's what I did, and I've been doing that ever since. It was really funny because after about 2, maybe 3 months, when I had the Latte logo created, and this was right after the Vlad the Vampire arc.
Hmm.
My mom and I went to MarsCon. It's this local convention here in the Twin Cities. focused on science fiction, but fantasy is given its place of honor as well. And my mother, who is herself an international bestselling author, she was a guest of honor ages ago. And when you're a guest of honor at MarsCon, you then have a standing invitation to be a guest all years after that. So she went and she brought me with her because I was had Citadel was due for release in like 2 months at that point. And that was the first time, it was not the first time she and I had gone to a convention together as colleagues. But it was the first time where I was recognized way more than her. Like the first 2 days,
Wow.
I was recognized by like 5 different people, and mom was just kind of in the background going like, "What is happening?" That's TikTok, and people really liked it. And she's just like, "You know what? I'm fine with this. Okay, this is hilarious." Um, and that's kind of just been the running joke ever since, where like I'll be recognized in the wild or at conventions way more often than my mother, who she's not afraid of showing her face online, but she doesn't do it nearly as often as I do.
Right, interesting. So, this series blends humor with real world issues, as you've said in the very beginning. Real world issues being, you know, dealing with LGBTQ rights, dealing with racism, and we know the current issue, which is
Mm-hmm.
right now is a living hellscape.
Everything.
How do you approach that balance so that it remains both engaging and respectful?
Gosh, it's hard to put it into words, honestly. A lot of it is just instinct. Um, CaFae Latte, the TikTok series, is both realism and, in a way, power fantasy. Um, Part of the reason why a lot of people liked it is because it takes the real food service industry and its problems, especially with like, parents and
Yeah.
unruly customers, and it gives people the power fantasy of, well, what if this fairy was just cursing Karens into silence and telling them to shut up and giving people a taste of their own medicine? Like, that we can't do that in real life, but this is fantasy. So it's, it's basically, I have to give a happy ending pretty much every time I'm on TikTok, especially since like TikTok is notoriously um has that hair trigger censorship issue,
Mm-hmm.
especially these days. And so going into darker details, like what I like to do in my novels, I mean, The Witcher Trades with Death, my dark fantasy novel, is it's basically a story of rape recovery.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to do that in a TikTok series. So part of it is the fact that I reserve the really darker stuff for the novelization. Like
Yeah.
Heart of Iron is a bit darker and angstier and has more gritty realism to it than the TikTok series. Um, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One, I'm bad at acting negative emotions. I'm much better at acting, happier stuff or positive stuff. And my range is limited, so I have to stay with my acting range. And then there's the TikTok censorship, and then there's the fact that when people are scrolling, we get enough of the bad. Like it's let's make people laugh, and it's a lot easier to make people laugh for me in video form than in book form. I can still do it. I still have quite a few lines, especially in Heart of Iron, that are, they do make people laugh, especially when JC and Cyrus were arguing about cupcakes versus muffins. Um, that that was a thing, which was inspired by, pulled straight from the TikTok series, just in a different place. Um, so it's like I said, it's more instinctive. I don't like shying away from real problems, but I still want to give people comfort and hope. And so I have to create these stories, these arcs where we have these big serious problems and like characters go through a lot, but you know, they have a happy ending, at least in the TikTok series. Books, when we go down to with once those books really get established, I still do believe in happy endings, or at least happy for now. But they're going through a bit more of a ringer.
Yeah. Now, your characters reflect a wide range of identities and lived experiences, so how do you approach building that into your stories?
Um, well, with CaFae Latte, it's pretty easy because it's the real world just with magic.
Yeah.
So it's, as I said, it takes place in the Twin Cities area. We have a bunch of Muslims. We have Black people. We have Latinos, and we just have all these different identities in the state of Minnesota. Um, and so it's just a matter of doing some basic Google research. A lot of times, I will even make a TikTok video asking that specific community. Like um when I was introducing Ziznia, who is a pansexual Muslim
Mm-hmm.
woman, I didn't know how to put on, like, I ordered one of those like slip-on hijabs that are like super easy. You don't have to like,
Yeah.
fold it or on yourself. So I went that, but I wasn't sure which way was up. So I just made a video, filming myself with it, asking, doing the hashtags and everything, like, hey, hijabis on TikTok, it's A or B, which is the right way. And they were really like, it's A. And just stuff like that. So, some Googling, making sure the sources are actually like Muslim rather than like people commenting on Muslims and Islam. Um, and there's also the fact that no group is a monolith. So I'm not thinking, oh, what does a Muslim have to say about it? Like, no, what does this particular woman who is this sexuality and who was born and raised here in America and has these life experiences, what does she think about, this tenet of Islam or this idea? Because like there's range, there's gray areas, there's a bunch of infighting, there's so many different interpretations and perspectives, and so that's really fun to do. And sometimes you do get people who think that like she's misrepresenting Islam. Like, people are just like, okay, this, I as a hijabi Muslim might not agree with her about this, but this is something that, my friends that I've encountered in the community. So it feels real and it's and authentic, and that's fine. Or even Muslims like, I'm not a hijabi, so but I get that why she's wearing her headscarf on. Biggest issue has been the fact that she is openly pansexual, which it's funny to me because people are like, Muslims aren't allowed to be queer, and it's like, technically neither are Christians or Jews, or
Yeah.
like every religious organization has condemned the queer community in one way or another. Like, you don't get to hide behind your religion as an excuse to be homophobic.
Oh.
You just can't. So, and the funny thing is, in a way that's not funny at all, vast majority of people telling me this, who are like, saying, how dare you, make a openly queer Muslim character, the vast majority of people leaving those types of comments are non-Muslims.
Yeah.
There are people who are like, trying to be allies to the American Muslim community by being queer phobic. And it's just like, no, no. It is, people say, well, it's not realistic. Well, it is. And there are, in fact, quite a few queer Muslims in my comment section and DMs who are so grateful to see that type of intersectionality in a story. And to have her be, way more than her sexuality or religion. That's just two facets of who she is. She's also a mom, and she's an ex-CIA agent. And she's the mom friend of the group who, tried to baby the 1,200-year-old fairy when she got a paper cut. And, um, and just all that stuff. And it's really fun. So the way that I approach diverse characters, especially in groups that I am not a part of, like Muslims or Jews or um, black people, Latina, um, different types of queer. I am aromantic asexual, but I am cisgender, so I have trans and non-binary characters. Obviously, do the research.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of Googling, lots of book reading. Reddit is phenomenal with real life experiences. It was great, especially for Olivia and Nicole's more visible autistic traits with things like food sensitivities. Like, what are the most common food sensitivities? Best and worst things about being autistic. Do you mask in public? Why or why not? Or like, do you disclose that you're autistic to certain people? Why or why not? And what does a meltdown feel like?
Mm-hmm.
Very hand love Reddit. Reddit's phenomenal with that. And then, I have a big enough community where I can just make a video asking a question like that and get a ton of comments and DMs and responses. That really helps me get a picture of, all the different types of ways that humans deal with being Black in America or being autistic in America.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, no group is a monolith, but there are patterns, and you can kind of trace that pattern and replicate it in the character, or you can even have a character that goes against that pattern and, have a damn good reason why or why not. That's basically how I do that. Where once I realize like, oh, I want to make an autistic character, or oh, I want this pre-established character who I haven't even really like the ER nurse that popped up time and time again, but didn't have a name for the longest time because she didn't really have an arc or a character or
Yeah.
anything much beyond the overworked ER nurse who doesn't make anyone shit. That was when ICE was first being a thing, when I was just like, yeah, I need to like have a talk about this. So let's make her Latina. I don't want to make a whole new character. Let's just give this pre-established character a proper name and background and backstory and problems to deal with. Um, and that's basically how I do that. And then also the fact that, you're gonna get things
Yeah.
wrong. I most often get things wrong with excuse me. I most often get things wrong with Husnia because that was raised Christian, not well. So the her first appearance, I didn't have hijab, but I did have those ninja masks
Yeah.
from the pandemic that I just put over my hair, and then had a little um tag on screen saying pretend it's a hijab, which I'm like, this is gonna be hilarious. And we're
Yeah.
making fun of me being unprepared and all this stuff. And intro skit where she's interviewing for the job is great. It's clear that she's Muslim, but the joke is that she has a mommy mode moment
Yeah.
with this centuries old fairy. And I got a ton of great comments and engagement, people saying, yay, we have this is phenomenal. And then I also had a couple of comments saying, so if she's hijabi, she should not be wearing a t-shirt because we cover up to the
Yeah.
and I'm just like, oh crap, I knew that. God damn it. And so I had time to get a sweater, a cardigan for her next appearance. I'm still annoyed with myself for that because that definitely broke people's immersion. In a later skit, she is quietly praying during the very tense phone conversation with the evil witch coven that has stolen
Mm-hmm.
Raythu's sister's dragon egg. And she, being the devout Muslim, I'm like, this woman is obviously going to be quietly praying for success. And as a Christian, my hands were clasped palms like this. And again, had a couple of comments very politely telling me, FYI, for future reference, Muslims don't pray like this. They pray like they're teaching God's grace or blessing or something, which I was adorable. And I'm like, damn it, got it wrong again. But if those are like the worst, like if those are like the worst things I get wrong, um, that's fine. Like people appreciate honest effort, and as long as you keep approaching your research and this space as a student, understanding that you're never going to be a master at it, you're going to be good.
Hey everybody, JL here. This has been part 1 of Voices and Visions with CM Alongi. Part 2 will be out on April 19th, so keep an eye out where we continue the conversation. But if you would like to experience the full conversation in one place, the complete episode will be available on Patreon.